Okay, so you'll be given a minute to respond to each question. I'll be timing, and you can use as much or as little of that time as you want to answer. When you have 10 seconds left, I'll put my hand up as a warning. You'll also have a minute and a half at the end to provide closing remarks. If we have time, we'll also go to some questions that were submitted by the public beforehand.
Okay.
It is 11:05, and we're aiming to end around 11:20-ish.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the first question is, have you had any prior experience with student council?
Yes. So, as some of you know, I am currently the executive secretary of Student Council. So I'm running for the same position I'm in currently. And before that, I was a elected member for the formerly minority rep position, which has now been transformed into the equity and inclusion cabinet. So I had like 1 year as an elected representative, and this last year on the e-board.
Okay. As secretary, what would be your biggest priority if elected, and what changes would you want to see implemented on student council?
Yeah. So I think as secretary, there's some specific things that I would like to focus on in our platform. I think some of this is like continuing on what we've done as like the current e-board, but some of the things that I think still need to be addressed or that we've been working on but can still be furthered upon or like expanded upon in this coming year is internal like council reforms. So this year we've been able to do a lot in terms of kind of shifting the dynamics of student council and making it more accessible to like different populations of students. I feel like in the past, student council has been predominantly white and predominantly male, and also has not had a lot of diversity in majors and like experiences, backgrounds, and things like that. And so something that we did this year is like, for example, expand the minority rep position into the equity and inclusion cabinet. And I think that got a lot more voices on council. I think similarly, different ad hoc committees that we had this year, such as like the one that I work with, which is constitutional reform, also like was an opportunity for council to kind of shift its perspective to have more student like voices and input, like increasing the amount of ad hoc committees that are working on like specific issues and having both council members and like students, constituents on like giving their input and like kind of guiding the next steps that council would take. Last sentence has been like some of the things that we've been doing, and I think that that's kind of the direction that we should take, which is like reforming council internally.
So serving as the voice of the student body can be a time-consuming job. How would you handle the workload and pressure involved?
Yeah, so I think that from this last year on being on the executive board, I've had to learn a lot about like time management and all of the like responsibilities that have to do with being on the executive board, and then just being with council, being in council in general. And I think the philosophy that we've like the current executive board has like tried to promote, and that I think we would continue trying to promote in the coming year, is that everyone in student council is students first. And so I think that whenever, you know, we walk into a meeting and there's like, we don't know if this is someone's fifth meeting or like first meeting, if someone's having a good day or a bad day. And I think that being like compassionate and understanding of everyone's situations, and making like meeting spaces like accessible spaces, like comfortable spaces, and then also like being efficient and like being respectful of everybody's time is how to like work on time, like work, how to like manage time properly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What type of experiences do you think make you qualified for this position, and how do you think your unique perspective would be reflected on council?
Yeah, so I think before student council, I was also involved, or I'm currently still involved in the Latin American Student Organization. So I have like experience of being in like other leadership positions, and also like engaging like in that position I engage more with like students, and like I think in this position it's more like I don't know, like administrative, more like back end stuff. But I think that's definitely an experience that I had before council. But I think everything that I've done from being a minority rep 2 years ago to being on the executive board this year has been like what's built up like my toolkit for being able to be in this position. I mean, we've done like so much work with advocating for constituents within council, with council, and so I think that that's where the majority of my experience comes from.
How would you design the agenda for council meetings and record attendance of council members?
Yeah, so the system that we have currently is like I just take attendance at the beginning of the meeting. We have like a shared attendance sheet so that committees are like student council's internal committees are able to like take attendance themselves as well on the same sheet, and then we could track it from there. And then the current agenda is also created by me, but it was like based on a template that we've been using for years now. And so this year we tried to like shift that a little bit, and I hope in future, in this coming year, we're able to change it a lot more so that the meeting doesn't, like this year we had meetings that went over an hour and a half, which is like not acceptable, and it's not respectful of like everyone's time because council is a big club and it has a lot of members. So ideally, I think changing the agenda to be more efficient in the next year would be what I hope for.
How do you plan on working with the president of the university to successfully implement council projects?
Yeah, so I think this year an important partnership that we established was with the president's office, and through that partnership we've been able to do a lot like as a student council, and a lot for students in terms of like advocating direct concerns to students and getting a pretty quick response. And I think also this partnership kind of opens us up, like the fact that we've been meeting with President Angel throughout the year kind of opened us up to have like certain opportunities, like for example during this like crisis that is going on, we've had a lot of opportunities to sit at important tables and to like get updates and to kind of also voice student concerns directly to the president. I think that because we already have this established partnership with the president's office, that President Angel will be able to help us kind of like transition into making that partnership with President Fithian when he comes in. So I think I feel pretty confident about like that partnership continuing, and like how that can help students and how that can help our like advocacy as student council.
Okay, I'm just going to move on to some questions from the public then. What would you say is your greatest contribution to the greater Clark community? So that can be like whether Clark itself, Worcester, Boston, however you see that.
I think just like the different ways that I'm involved on campus is like my contribution. And I think also the care I have for like our community. I remember last year when we were campaigning, I made like a really cheesy post on my Instagram about how much I care about the Clark community, and that's why I wanted to run. And I think that's what I contribute, like the care I have for students and the care I have for advocating like student discontent and like concerns, and making sure that Clark like the administration is held accountable and continues to support students the way it should, even like students that are like most underrepresented, students that are like most vulnerable in situations like the ones that we're going on right now. I think like my care and compassion for students in those situations, and just for everyone in like our community.
Okay. What policies would you implement to improve inclusivity for transgender and non-binary students?
Yeah, so I think that that's definitely like an area where our advocacy has either been like faced a lot of barriers, or like we haven't focused enough on. So All Gender Bathrooms has been a platform that has been a part of our platform since last year, and unfortunately because of a lot of roadblocks in terms of like the administration and then just like logistical things, we haven't been able to implement that fully. But I think that's one of the first things that we'd like to do in order to be more inclusive. And I think beyond that, thinking about accessibility for people who are non-binary or trans is kind of the next step. Like what else? Because a lot of constituents have come up to us and told us about some of the issues that they face, not only with like bathrooms in different like buildings, but also just accessibility in spaces and feeling safe in spaces. And I think like continuing advocacy in that respect is like something that we need to do going forward. And obviously the first, like, while all gender bathrooms is something we've heard about and that we want to implement, I think the next step is to continue hearing from constituents about what else can be improved.
Okay. Lastly, what steps would you take to make sure that you hear and represent the entire student body?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely like an important focus that like, or an approach that we'd like to take, because despite our, or like rather in light of the fact that we've been like able to in the last year include more voices in council that haven't like been represented before, I think is a like really good improvement. But there's still like voices and demographics and like corners of the campus and the student body that aren't being reached despite like our efforts. So I think in the coming year, we definitely want to make our outreach more intentional in terms of like thinking about who is not being reached. So like historically, we also haven't had a lot of athletes on student council, but I think this year we have quite a few more athletes. So I think that's also a population that sometimes we don't even discuss in council or like think about as a constituency. And yeah, I think in the coming year, we have to be more proactive and intentional about reaching people that we haven't historically as a council, or that perhaps are like our space isn't accessible to them for them to like voice their opinions and whatnot.
Okay, let's move to closing remarks. Again, as a reminder, you'll have a minute and a half and you can talk about whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Well, I didn't really prepare closing remarks, but I guess I can just continue to say I feel like I've spoken like pretty broadly about everything, but I think the main like, because like short time, but I think the main point that I'd like to like leave you all with is just that when like I started campaigning for eBoard last year, our like intention behind our like slogan strive was to like begin doing work that was really important, that we saw a need for on campus. And so I think that that's what I'd like to do continuing in this position, is to continue helping students, to continue advocating for students and improving upon and expanding upon some of the things that we've been able to start working on. So I think that's some of the things you've seen are like menstrual equity and big projects like that, and our advocacy right now currently during like students, the university closure and students like having different needs. But I think that's going to continue like throughout the year, and I want to make sure that council continues to be like a more accessible space and the different voices are being heard. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. I know it's been a hectic time.
Yeah. Well, thank you.